All right. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently 3:48 p.m. and of course today's date is the 22nd of July 2025. How are you doing? Good afternoon. It is hot, hot, hot for sure. Shout out to everybody who is tuned in right now and will tune in. God bless you. America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and God is the greatest ever. Okay, so with that being said, I just want to say thank you to you guys. You are currently tuned into the Genesis Show. It is your boy Genesis, and today we're gonna check out a couple of topics. But firstly, we're gonna listen to this hearing by Senate Judiciary Committee. They're holding a Biden border betrayal criminal aliens in America. It's a tragic story. Angel moms are talking about their predicament and the story, sad story, very, very tragic story of how, you know, they lost their kids to criminal, illegal aliens. And it is tragic. But as Americans, you should listen to it, you should hear about it, and you should be aware of it so you can protect your loved ones and also just be aware, just be aware. With that being said, thank you for tuning in. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or a Democrat or independent, it doesn't matter. What matters is you are an American, you love America, you believe in America, and then you love God. I mean, that's it. As long as you love America, you love God, you believe in America, you believe in God, that's it. That's it. That's all that counts. It's not party first. It is country first. All right. So it's America first before your parties. Okay. It's not Republican or Democrat first. It is America first before you are a Republican or a Democrat. So everybody come together, unite for one course. Okay. For one cause, which is making America great and keeping America great and loving one another. All right. With that being said, we're going to dive into the hearing. Be nice in the comment section because you need to be aware that you are, you know, chatting with your fellow American sister or your fellow American brother. So, yeah, enjoy yourself and be nice. Here we go.
The Senate Subcommittee on Border Security and Immigration will come to order. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the devastation that criminal aliens have caused in communities across the United States. In particular, we aim to show the American people how the realities on the ground are very different from the narrative peddled by the mainstream media. Rather than truthfully and honestly reporting the facts, media outlets have spread misinformation, allowing harmful, false rhetoric to dominate the airways. The result of these falsehoods is that radical far-left activists have taken to the street and targeted and demonized the very people who are charged with enforcing the law, laws that Congress has passed, and that would be ICE immigration enforcement officers. The first false narrative I want to address is a claim that illegal aliens are not criminals, but law-abiding individuals. Neither the Democrats nor the media are willing to tell the public the truth. That the moment an alien illegally enters the United States, they have committed a crime under the U.S. law to enter the U.S. legally. America is a country of laws, and we expect anyone who wishes to come to our country to obey those laws. Another false narrative peddled by the far left is that illegal aliens are not receiving due process. when they are arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This naturally begs the question, what sort of process are these individuals actually due? The idea that someone could break our laws, enter our country illegally, and then be entitled to all the rights and privileges of an American citizen is a little far-fetched, to be sure. While the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution applies to all individuals within the United States, illegal aliens are not entitled to the same level of due process as American citizens. The fact of the matter is that by the time any alien has received an order of removal, they have had all the due process they are owed under the law. Most aliens with final orders of removal have been in the immigration system for almost a decade. Many have had the opportunity to have their day in court, the very essence of due process, but they neglected to show up. Another false narrative is that ICE is not targeting the worst of the worst criminals. But the fact of the matter is that as we speak, there are 291,141 criminal aliens in the United States today who have final orders of removal. Just this morning in the Senate Judiciary Committee, a comment was made that ICE is targeting gardeners. Well, 291,141 criminal aliens who are under final orders of removal are still in the United States. For this fiscal year alone, 213,279 criminal aliens with final orders of removal already have convictions, while 78,546 have pending criminal charges. Even more disturbing is the fact that 282,194 of these criminal aliens are still roaming free and not in ICE custody yet. There are many criminal aliens in the United States continuing to commit heinous crimes, even to this day. Some of these criminals are part of transnational criminal networks and organized gangs. All you need to do is look at the posters in this room to see some of the worst criminals ICE has apprehended recently: murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and sex traffickers. One of our witnesses here today, Sheriff Roy Boyd, can attest to the types of crimes he sees, even in Goliad, the Texas county with a population of less than 8,000. The Friday before the July the 4th weekend, Sheriff Boyd's officers arrested a 29-year-old Iranian national who entered the United States illegally, not once, but twice. The first time this criminal committed a violent aggravated felony in Indiana, and while he was charged for the crime, he received a suspended sentence in exchange for his removal from the United States. But his crime spree did not end there. Despite being deported, he returned to the United States again, illegally. And what did he do when he came back? He murdered a man in Galveston, Texas, a murder that was caught on video. Thankfully, he was arrested less than 12 hours later with the murder weapon still in his possession. This crime should never have happened. I want to remind my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that there was a time in the not-so-distant past when they agreed that criminal aliens should be deported. But it seems like amnesia has set in, especially because we now happen to have a president in office who's restored the rule of law and now requires enforcement of existing laws. Recall the deporter-in-chief? That would be President Obama. And who was in charge of immigration enforcement during President Obama's term in office? None other than Tom Homan, President Trump's current border czar. In fact, Tom Homan received a Presidential Rank Award during the Obama administration for his service as the head of ICE's enforcement and removal operations. The laws haven't changed since President Obama was in office. Only the party of the president in office has changed. And today we have a pro-enforcement president who was elected in a decisive victory, winning the Electoral College, the popular vote, in every single swing state. He was elected in large part, I'd submit, because of his pro-immigration enforcement provisions, something 54% of Americans support, including Hispanic Americans in my state, many of whose families have come here lawfully and followed all the rules. American voters know full well that deterrence is an important part of immigration enforcement and preventing the flow of criminal aliens into the United States, which means swift apprehension, detention, and deportation. And that works. The Congress just recently passed what's been called the One Big Beautiful Bill that includes billions of additional dollars for ICE detention facilities and for more personnel to make sure that our laws on the books that Congress passed and were signed into law are actually enforced. The state of Florida has stepped up to the plate recently, helping the administration to open a detention facility that's come to be known as Alligator Alcatraz. I'm hopeful that other states will step up to help in similar ways. If we could find a way to make something like this work in Texas, I would strongly support it. And I'd encourage our governor, as well as Secretary Noem, to explore the possibility of locating future detention facilities in Texas. The far-left activists and the mainstream media who support their efforts continue to fan the flame with their rhetoric and misinformation. This is done with one goal in mind: to do anything and everything to undermine President Trump's domestic agenda, just as they did during his first term. And finally, I'd like to end my remarks with a reminder. We're here today to remind the public of the real tragedy of President Biden's open border policies, the hundreds of victims of criminal illegal aliens, crimes that could have been avoided if the laws on the books had simply been enforced. That's why we have two wonderful angel moms here today. First, Maria Vega, the mother of slain border agent Javier Vega Jr., who was killed August the 3rd, 2014. Javier's angelversary, as Ms. Vega calls the date of his death, is less than 2 weeks away. Javier died nearly 11 years ago, but the fact remains he was murdered by illegal aliens who never should have been in the United States in the first place. I was proud to honor Javier and work with the National Border Patrol Council in the Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol sector to have a Border Patrol checkpoint named in his honor. I also want to welcome Tammy Nobles, the mother of Kayla Hamilton. This is a particularly difficult week for her because Kayla's birthday is July the 24th, this Thursday, and the anniversary of her death is July 27th, this upcoming Sunday. And I'm grateful that she's willing to join us here today and tell her story. Ms. Nobles said the most joyful day for her was when her daughter was born, and the saddest day for her is her daughter's heaven date, July the 27th. Kayla was viciously murdered by an MS-13 gang member who originally entered the United States as an unaccompanied minor and was released into the custody of an unvetted sponsor. We're honored to have both Maria and Tammy with us today to share their stories and tell about the loss of their loved ones and how it continues to impact their lives today. I also want to welcome Victor Avila. Victor knows all too well the price that our law enforcement officers pay just to do their jobs. Victor and his partner were shot by gang members. Victor was seriously wounded and his partner lost his life on that day. I intend to introduce a bill in the Senate to honor Ms. Noble's daughter, Kayla Hamilton. The bill will require that HHS conduct mandatory checks on all unaccompanied minors and bar criminal alien sponsors from being allowed to assume custody of such children. A similar bill was introduced by Representative Russell Fry in the House. You may ask, why is it necessary to pass a law to get Health and Human Services to do mandatory checks on unaccompanied minors and to bar criminal alien sponsors? Well, that's because laws barring that do not currently exist, and we need to make sure that this can never happen again. And now I yield to Ranking Member Padilla to give his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for being here. You know, prior to the start of this Congress, for nearly 4 years, I served as chair of this subcommittee with then Ranking Member Cornyn. Now our roles have been reversed. So I'm happy to be here as a ranking member under Chairman Cornyn's leadership here. For 4 years, though, when I was chair, we held hearings examining everything from immigrants serving in the military and then our healthcare system to America's Refugees Admissions Program and the need to better resource our overwhelmed immigration courts. So today, 6 months after President Biden has left office, we hear Republicans continue to talk about how Donald Trump has solved our border crisis. But you won't be surprised to learn that they're also focusing on, guess what? The Biden border betrayal, that's what they call it. And I suspect that years down the road, they'll continue to point the finger at President Biden. But here's what Republicans won't be saying. That if Donald Trump and Republicans were truly focused on just targeting violent criminals, Democrats would have no objections. I know I've been saying it. If that's really what was going on, there would be no discussion, there would be no debate, there would be no disagreement. You also won't hear Republicans share the data, the fact that a large number of undocumented immigrants in the United States actually entered the United States lawfully and are only currently undocumented because they overstayed their visa, or maybe they entered the country following the rules of the temporary protected status programs outlined by prior administrations, but protections that have been removed, turning a legal immigrant into an undocumented immigrant. You won't hear them share those facts. 6 months into Donald Trump's second term as president, it is increasingly clear who the administration is going after. Just look at how they're doing it. They're raiding workplaces and staking out court hearings. They're going after farmers and farm workers, students and families and business owners, many of whom, other than being undocumented, do not have any violent criminal record, and men who have been living here, contributing to the success of their communities and the country for years and years, if not decades. So none of what we're seeing happening around the country, or very little, is actually targeting criminals. And I'm not asking you to take my word for it. It shouldn't be hard, but it is hard for some to take my word for it. Let's look at the administration's own data. Less than 10% of immigrants who ICE has taken into custody have serious criminal convictions. Less than 10%. Again, don't just take my word for it.
Enders.
This is administration's
Shout out to
data.
Enders.
In fact, compared to the first Trump administration,
Bucket Master in the house.
Donald Trump and
Bucket
Stephen Miller
Master,
quotas
Mr.
have led
Booski.
to a 500% increase in the number of arrests of non-citizens without criminal records. And as a federal judge ruled less than 2 weeks ago, there is, quote, a mountain of evidence, end quote, showing federal agents are illegally profiling and arresting people based on their race, accents, or work. So no, let's not pretend that this is only about cracking down on violent criminals. This is increasingly about sending armored vehicles and agents and tactical gear into communities to intimidate and sow fear, not to protect. Should also at some point ask the questions about where the resources are being redirected from to escalate the immigration enforcement activities. Because the fact of the matter is, whether they're being diverted elsewhere within the Department of Homeland Security, from the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, they're being taken away from other critical missions that are critical to our nation's security. Not just white-collar crime. We can have a whole session just about that. How about fentanyl task forces that are now being under-resourced because of these ill-conceived strategies? Now, all this is not just morally wrong. It's also bad for our economy. The people being targeted are often the people who are harvesting our fruit and vegetables, who work in meatpacking plants or in the service industry, the very same group of people who just a few years ago, at the outset of the COVID pandemic, Donald Trump declared essential. And the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump has simply gone too far, and the public is starting to turn against him. A Gallup poll published on July 11th, just a couple of weeks ago, showed a dramatic swing in public opinion, in public awareness and understanding is how it should read. In just the last year, the percent of Americans who think immigration is, quote, a good thing for the country has jumped 15 points to a record high 79%. At the same time, Americans who want to see immigration decreased dropped from 55 to 30%. Americans across the country are rejecting the cruel and indiscriminate treatment of the neighbors they've known for decades. Yet earlier this month, Republicans in Congress rubber-stamped more than $150 billion to fund this administration's disastrous enforcement agenda. $150 billion, not to help hire additional asylum officers that we so desperately need to process the cases and meet the demand on our system, not $150 billion to ensure that unaccompanied children, for example, some as young as 2 or 3 years old, have legal counsel as they face a judge on their own, with their own future on the line, and not $150 billion to hire additional immigration judges, even as more and more people are detained and the administration is firing immigration judges at alarming rates. Instead, this is additional taxpayer dollars to ramp up the mass deportation raids that have been so poorly executed. They are sweeping up United States citizens, including veterans. And so I do ask, why are we here? What more do you want? It's clear why we're here today. We're here because Donald Trump is scapegoating immigrants. It's always been his outlet. It's long been his way to distract from a massively unpopular agenda, like making the largest cuts to Medicaid in history in order to pay for tax cuts for the rich, and to make ICE's budget larger than the budget of the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Bureau of Prisons combined. This is their break glass in case of emergency option when public sentiment turns against them and their agenda. Hasn't been only about targeting violent criminals, and it's certainly not about fixing or modernizing our immigration system. So Democrats are glad to be here today to help set the record straight. My message to the Trump administration is this: the numbers don't back you up. The heartbreaking stories we hear on a daily basis do not back you up, and the American public doesn't back you up. So I urge this subcommittee and the committee as a whole to please, let's get back to the real work of reforming our immigration system. And with that, Mr. Chair, if I can introduce the minority witnesses.
Let me please ask all of the witnesses to stand, and I'll administer the oath. And we'll do the introductions. If you raise your right hand or repeat after me, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. Please be seated. I'll introduce the majority witnesses, and then I'll turn it over to Senator Padilla. Tammy Nobles, as you've heard, is the mother of Kayla Hamilton, who was murdered by Walter Javier Martinez, an illegal alien gang member who entered the United States as an unaccompanied alien child from El Salvador. When Kayla was being murdered, she managed to call and left a voicemail on her boyfriend's phone. In the voicemail, you can hear the struggle going on in the background, and Kayla could be heard crying. Martinez can be heard in the voicemail hushing her and near the end telling her, "I'm sorry," in Spanish, while strangling her with a phone cord. After Kayla was dead, Martinez tied her up and sexually assaulted her. Kayla fought for her life that day. She had bruises up and down her arms, her fingers and left side of her face, her back, and down her leg, and deep wounds to her neck from the cord. Victor Avila is a retired ICE Homeland Security Investigation Supervisory Special Agent. As an HSI Special Agent, Victor served on the border and is an accredited diplomat to Mexico, Spain, and Portugal. He advised those governments on complex and wide-ranging criminal investigations, including narcotics trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, financial violations, commercial fraud, and counterterrorism. While he was on official assignment to Mexico, Victor suffered multiple gunshot wounds and survived a violent ambush by the Mexican Los Zetas cartel, where Special Agent Jaime Zapata tragically lost his life in the line of duty. Maria Vega is the mother of former U.S. Marine and Border Patrol Agent Javier Vega, Jr. On Sunday, August the 3rd, 2014, Javier Vega was out with his family when two criminal illegal aliens ambushed him and tried to steal Javier's truck. The two aliens jumped out of the stolen vehicle they were driving and without hesitation or warning began shooting at Javier and his family. The illegal aliens shot Javier in the back and his father in the chest in front of his minor children. Andrew R. Arthur is a resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington, D.C. Arthur previously served as staff director for the United States House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, the National Security Subcommittee from January 2015 to September 2016, and was counsel for the United States House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary in Washington, D.C. from July 2001 to November 2006. Sheriff Roy Boyd is the sheriff of Goliad County, Texas. Goliad is a rural South Texas county with a population of around 1,000, situated about halfway between Houston and Laredo along U.S. Highway 59. Sheriff Boyd has been a police officer for 31 years and retired from the Victoria Police Department and the Victoria County Sheriff's Office prior to becoming sheriff of Goliad County. Sheriff Boyd has also worked as one of the leads on Texas's Operation Lone Star. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before introducing the minority witnesses, I do want to take a moment to express my sympathies with Mrs. Vega and Mr. Nobles for your loss. And on behalf of all my Democratic colleagues, I also reiterate that we denounce violence, particularly violence against law enforcement. So I just want to make sure we are clear where we stand on this side of the aisle. First, I'd like to introduce Alejandro Barranco. Alejandro is a Marine veteran from Orange, California, an older brother to two active duty Marines and son to Narciso Barranco. Alejandro's father, Narciso, is an immigrant from Mexico who has lived in the United States for more than 30 years and has never committed a crime in the United States. Today, Alejandro will testify about the violent and outrageous treatment his father experienced at the hands of Border Patrol agents and the betrayal that he feels as a veteran who proudly served his country. Thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Deborah Fleischhaker. Ms. Fleischhaker has served in several career and political roles at the Department of Homeland Security, as well as ICE, including as ICE's acting chief of staff. Ms. Fleischhaker has also served as ICE's Assistant Director for Regulatory Affairs and Policy and as DHS's Executive Secretary and acting DHS Chief Privacy and Chief FOIA Officer. Ms. Fleischhaker will lean on her extensive experience and understanding of both DHS and ICE operations in her testimony today. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to introduce retired police commander Dr. Giovanni Velis. Dr. Velis served with the Minneapolis Police Department for over 30 years before retiring in 2023. As an officer, he worked with the Drug Enforcement Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation task forces, as well as the Minneapolis Police Department's organized crime unit. After immigrating from Ecuador and growing up in New York City, Dr. Velis was the first immigrant to serve as a police lieutenant and commander in the Minneapolis Police Department. He will testify about the importance of building bridges between law enforcement and immigrant communities from his professional and academic perspectives. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I know we're anticipating the attendance of Chairman Grassley here momentarily, but in the meantime, we'll hear opening statements from the witnesses. And Mr. Avila, can we start with you? And if you'll please keep your statement to 5 minutes, and then we'll get through everybody, and then we can come back and ask some questions, have more of a discussion.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. Good afternoon, Senator Padilla. Good afternoon to the panel members. My name is Victor Avila. I am a retired ICE Homeland Security Investigations Supervisory Special Agent. HSI is responsible for investigating crimes involving immigration, trade, customs, and border security that threaten the security of the American homeland. While serving with HSI, I personally led criminal investigations of human traffickers, drug smugglers, and violent criminals, many of whom were criminal illegal aliens. During my tenure as a federal officer, I served under 3 different administrations, and as an HSI special agent, I served on the border, born and raised in El Paso, Texas, and also, like you mentioned, as an accredited diplomat in Mexico, Spain, and Portugal. I advise these governments on complex and wide-ranging criminal investigations, including narcotics trafficking, armed trafficking, human trafficking, financial violations, commercial fraud, and counterterrorism. You mentioned this, Senator, while on official assignment in Mexico. I suffered 3 gunshot wounds and survived by the grace of God after a violent ambush by Los Zetas cartel, where my partner, Special Agent Jaime Zapata, tragically lost his life in the line of duty. I have witnessed what a human being is capable to do to another, especially a child. As a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigations and victims identification, I tragically have seen things that I will not ever be able to take away from my head. I describe it as pure evil. Drug trafficking, human smuggling are just a few crimes that illegal aliens are involved with. I have experienced the violence and the imminent threat that we face from not just the illegal aliens, many of who are associated with Mexican cartels. What is happening today with our ICE officers and agents is unprecedented. The doxing of our men and women of ICE and accusing them of kidnapping when it's a lawful arrest or disappearing people simply must stop. They are upholding their oath and performing the scope of their duties. Vilifying officers because some people disagree with the enforcement of the law or because it contradicts their ideology is just not acceptable. Thousands of police officers arrest people every single day, and that officer is not singled out for doing their job. Why, then, are ICE officers being targeted? This, I believe, is a politically driven issue. How do we get here? The Biden administration opened the border utilizing illegal policy like the CBP One app and exploiting our asylum criteria and parole systems. The Biden administration was very successful in limiting the budget for ICE. They were successful at bringing the morale down in law enforcement, especially Border Patrol. They were successful in having them lose their identity, stripped of their authority, tie their hands behind their backs to not do their jobs. The interior enforcement that you're seeing right now was almost non-existent, especially worksite enforcement. They were silenced by the media. The priority of ICE is the removal of criminal illegal aliens, those with existing criminal histories in the U.S. or their home country. However, there are illegals in the U.S. that were not properly vetted by the Biden administration, and although no criminal history is registered in our databases, many are affiliated with a gang or cartel activity. Those caught as a collateral will also be processed for removal as well. Illegal aliens detected and arrested by ICE are receiving due process. It's important to note that not all illegal aliens face the same removal proceedings. It depends how the illegal entered the U.S., where they entered, the country of origin, many different factors. Some illegals are subject to mandatory detention, while others can be removed immediately, like visa overstays. The illegals with final removal orders and their due process through an immigration court subject them to arrest and removal immediately. And just to be clear, ICE officers and HSI special agents do not require a warrant to conduct an arrest. 90+% of the arrests that I conducted in my career were warrantless. It is important for Congress to engage with other countries for the removal process and establish memorandums of understandings, especially in Mexico and Central America. I think Congress has a vital role to better support the mission of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, ICE, and the roles that they play every single day safeguarding our border. We have many things to talk about that the big, beautiful bill you'll see a big difference coming very soon to augment their capacity. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Arthur?
Thank you. Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Padilla, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me today to discuss this salient topic. There's been a great deal of contention of late over ICE arrests of aliens in the interior. With 33 years of immigration experience as a prosecutor, congressional staffer, and immigration judge, I hope to put those arrests into context. Some 300,000 aliens have been arrested in the interior under the second Trump administration, according to DHS. That's more than the 113,500 aliens ICRO arrested in FY 2024 and the 170,600 ICE arrests in FY 2023. And the agency is on track to make twice as many interior arrests this year as in FY 2009, 298,000. That said, as the Supreme Court noted in INS versus Lopez Mendoza, a case addressing the legality of worksite raids, the average immigration officer made 500 alien arrests per year in 1984, at a time when the unauthorized population was significantly smaller. If ICE were operating at that same pace today, the agency would have made roughly 3 million interior arrests since January. According to DHS, 70% of the aliens ICE arrested in the last 6 months have criminal histories, either arrests or convictions. That's roughly equivalent to FY 2024, when 72% of ICE interior arrests involved aliens with criminal histories, but much higher than the 43% criminal history arrest rate in FY 2023. Most of the ICE enforcement attention, both in Congress and in the media, has focused on what ICE refers to as, quote, at-large arrests at homes and in public places. When I was an INS trial attorney in California in the mid-1990s, there were few at-large arrests because most jurisdictions allowed immigration officers into their jails and other secure facilities to take custody of criminal aliens. As the New York City Criminal Justice Coordinator told the House Judiciary Committee at a hearing I staffed in February 2003, the NYPD cooperated, quote, with federal authorities in investigating and apprehending aliens suspected of criminal activity. Close quote. As I note in my written testimony, that cooperation degraded in the mid-2010s as jurisdictions began implementing, quote, sanctuary policies, close quote, to impede ICE enforcement. Sanctuary policies only protect criminals, and if they were to end, ICE would likely be too busy processing criminals in local jails to perform any at-large arrests. Because alienage isn't a critical factor in most state and local arrests and prosecutions, there's no way to know what percentage of the undocumented have criminal records. But what is known is that 100% of criminal aliens do have criminal records, and the recidivism rate is high. A 2011 GAO study found that criminal aliens had, on average, 7 separate arrests apiece. As most of those criminal aliens live in and prey on immigrant communities, other immigrants are the ones harmed the most. Sanctuary policies also force ICE agents into the community to arrest criminal targets where the threat of violent resistance is higher and where they often encounter other aliens here unlawfully, likely the key reason why the percentage of ICE arrests involving aliens with criminal histories isn't higher. Note also that all aliens, including criminals, are entitled to constitutional protections throughout the removal process, including due process law. The process due those aliens, as Mr. Avila just noted, differs from what the Constitution accords to criminal defendants and is often less than that accorded to U.S. citizens. The Due Process Clause applies to all persons in the United States, but the Supreme Court has held, quote, the nature of that protection may vary dependent upon an alien's status and circumstance. Finally, I'll note that I was a congressional staffer on 9/11. Congress responded to those attacks by tightening the vetting process for aliens coming lawfully to protect Americans from criminals and other security threats. The hard-earned lessons of September 11th were ignored over the last 4 years, as the last administration released millions of unvetted aliens into our communities, too many of whom have gone on to harm innocent victims here. We have the most generous legal immigration system in the world, but American voters will only continue to support those policies if they are safe from criminal threats and know the laws will be enforced. That's likely why 75% of respondents in the most recent Harvard-Harris poll supported the current administration's, quote, efforts to deport criminals who are here illegally, close quote. In closing, thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Sheriff Boyd?
Chairman Cornyn and members of the Senate Committee, thank you for having me here today. As you've stated, I'm the sheriff of Goliad County, Texas. We're a small rural county sheriff's office, about halfway between Houston and Laredo on Highway 59. So we're on a major corridor for legitimate and illegitimate products going to and from the border. I'll get straight to the point. The border Biden policy has had the most significant negative impact on the safety and security of our communities in South Texas in my 31 years of law enforcement. As an example, in Goliad County at the Sheriff's Office, prior to 2021, the Goliad County Sheriff's Office averaged 77 arrests per year. From January 2021 to date, we've averaged 413 arrests per year. That's a significant increase. I looked in our records and found no records of smuggling of humans cases or engaging in organized criminal activity cases prior to January of 2021 for our law enforcement agency. From 2021 to 2025, the Goliad County Sheriff's Office arrested 96 people for smuggling of humans and 126 for engaging in organized criminal activity. These kind of activities have skyrocketed throughout Texas as a result of Biden's open border policy. On top of that, we've turned over 145 illegal aliens to Border Patrol for processing and possible deportation. But this policy has brought quite a few other things, including significant property damage. In South Texas, there have been thousands of events where smugglers have driven through fences and have caused much damage to private property, tearing down fences. There are multiple ranches in South Texas that have over $100,000 in fence damage per year as a result of this open border policy and the cartel incursions into South Texas. Many rural houses have been abandoned out of fear of the cartel smugglers going through. There's been a drastic increase in the auto theft of pickup trucks throughout South Texas, because what many people don't realize is that the smugglers are using stolen trucks. That takes tens of thousands of vehicles to get millions of people through South Texas every year. And those vehicles are stolen from Texans and used in this illicit trade. Trespassing on private property has become a commonplace to the point where many of the ranches have been abandoned, where people fear being on them. In Goliad County alone, even though we're 180 miles from the border, in 2021, we discovered 16 cartel stash sites in our county. Just the one, those are just the ones we found by going out and looking. We had what was described as the Department of Homeland Security as the largest inland cartel stash site ever discovered in the United States of America. But the property damage is just part of it. It's the physical and the psychological damage, and I will give you just a few examples starting in 2021. We have a lot of residents in rural South Texas with credible fear of the cartel smugglers coming through their property. In April of 2021, a traffic stop in Goliad County led to the arrest of Brisa Santana. What we found was Miss Santana had been recruited in a bar in Dallas by a gentleman from Mexico, and she had gone down to the border and picked up 3 girls who were all in their late teens, early 20s. And they were being told that they were being brought into the United States to be reunited with their family members who were already illegally here in the U.S. But our investigation revealed that Ms. Santana had fake Social Security cards in her underwear when we got her to jail, led to further questioning. And what that investigation revealed was those 3 young ladies were considered especials. They were never going to be reunited with their families here. They were being taken to Chinatown in Houston to be put in sex slavery, indentured servitude. As you already pointed out, earlier this month, we caught the murderer in our county. We've dealt with a lot of different violence as a result of the Biden's open border policy, but I will leave you with this. For anyone who does not believe that these things are happening, I'm gonna leave you with a quote from a letter I found in a sex slave house from a raid I did in Rockport, Texas. The letter that I found there starts off with, "Dear daughter, in the USA, we sometimes have something called a slave boy or a slave girl. We call it an indentured servant." This letter goes on to articulate that it takes 5 to 13 years for these slaves to buy their freedom once they're brought into the United States of America. That is, unless they're sold to a new master before their debt is paid off. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and I will yield for any questions you have.
Ms. Nobles?
Thank you for having me here today and allowing me to speak. On July 27, 2022, I received the worst news that a parent can ever get, that my newly 20-year-old daughter, Kayla Hamilton, was found deceased with injuries consistent with a homicide. There are no words to describe the heart-wrenching, soul-crushing pain of losing your child so horrifically. Kayla was a happy and loving person. She loved life and God. She loved going to church and learning about Jesus and the Bible stories. She showed the world that being yourself was okay, and you didn't have to follow everyone else. She was extremely ambitious, and despite having autism, she was determined to make her way in this world. She loved animals, especially her cat Oreo, and cared about the homeless. At first, we knew very few details of the murder until an arrest. At the end of March of 2022, Walter Javier Martinez was apprehended by Border Patrol crossing illegally into the U.S. at the southwest border in Rio Grande City, Texas. Martinez stated that he was 16 years old and he feared gang activity in his country in El Salvador. As a UAC, Martinez was granted access into the United States with no background checks or vetting. Health and Human Services and Homeland Security did not verify the sponsor and allowed Martinez to go live in Frederick, Maryland. There were behavior issues with him living with the sponsor, and he ended up staying with his half-brother who lived in the same neighborhood mobile home park as Kayla. There were behavioral issues with Walter, so the half-brother called the property manager of the mobile home park, which I thought was a legit company. We learned that an illegal immigrant who was a priest owned some of the mobile homes and allowed his cousin to rent a home to a 16-year-old gang member in the same mobile home as Kayla. Through the investigation of Kayla's murder, we found out that this priest and his cousin knew Walter Javier Martinez from El Salvador and knew he was running from a homicide. And they decided to put him in the same mobile home as Kayla. Kayla and her boyfriend and young family did not know Walter Javier Martinez, and they did not know their rental rights and didn't know they had a right to say no. They were all afraid to say no in fear of getting kicked out onto the streets, so they said nothing. Martinez was only living there for 5 days before he violently and brutally murdered my daughter. Walter Javier Martinez broke into Kayla's room while she was sleeping that morning. Kayla left a voicemail on her boyfriend's phone. According to the voicemail, a struggle was going on, and Kayla was heard crying, groaning, and struggling to breathe. Martinez was also heard on the voicemail, hushing her, and near the end telling her, "I'm sorry," in Spanish, while continuing strangling her with her phone cord. After she was deceased, Martinez tied her up and sexually assaulted her. This was confirmed by the annual swabs that matched Martinez's DNA. Kayla fought for her life that day. She had bruises up and down her arms, her fingers, the left side of her face, her back, and down her leg, and deep wounds to her neck from the cord. Local police knew right from the beginning that he was the main suspect just by their initial investigation. It took the Aberdeen Police Department to confirm that Martinez was a known MS-13 gang member and that he had a criminal record in El Salvador in 2020. If Health and Human Services or Homeland Security would have done a background check, then they would have known this, and Martinez would have not been able to be on U.S. soil. With Martinez being 16 years old, Maryland Child Protective Services took custody of Martinez until the DNA results came back. The Aberdeen Police Department was very transparent to CPS. They told they did tell Child Protective Services that he needed to be held in a secure location because he was a threat to society and based on the murder and injuries of Kayla Hamilton. It was later learned after Kayla's murder, Child Protective Services placed Martinez in a group home with other children where he was able to attend a public high school. And then when he had behavioral issues at the group home, they put him in a foster home, which allowed him to enroll into another Maryland high school. While in jail, a letter was intercepted that Martinez wrote confessing to 4 murders and 2 rapes and admitting he was a MS-13 gang member. Martinez ended up pleading guilty and taking the plea deal of 70 years. Since he was a juvenile at the time, even though he was tried as an adult, Martinez could not get life without the possibility of parole. Not only was Kayla's life put at risk and taken, so many other children and adults were at risk. The Biden-Harris administration did not put the American citizen safety first. We need to ensure the safety of our citizens and protect the children from being the wrong peers and then placement in the wrong group homes with unsuspected gang members. Background checks and vetting should be required at the start so that agencies can check for criminal records and gang affiliation in their home country. Sponsors also need to be screened and verified. Under the Kayla Hamilton Act introduced last week by Representative Fry, Health and Human Services will be required to gather background information on all potential sponsors and every adult in their household. If Homeland Security and Health and Human Services had checked Martinez's background, then they would have known that he was an MS-13 gang member, and my precious daughter Kayla would still be alive today. All both agencies had to do was make one phone call to El Salvador, and they would have known that he was an MS-13 gang member and that he had a criminal record for illicit gang activity. To prevent such tragedies from happening again, the Kayla Hamilton Act will mandate background checks on UACs and the sponsors so that no person will be at risk. Sorry, I went over
Thank
a
you,
little
Mrs.
bit.
Nobles. Mrs. Vega?
Thank you, Senator, for having me here and allowing me to tell our story. My name is Maria Herrera Vega. I am an angel mom and the mother of 2 incredible sons. Javier Harvey Vega Jr., my firstborn, one of my 2 pride and joys, an amazing grandson, son, brother, husband, father, you name it. He was it. He was just amazing with a heart of gold like no one you have ever met. An American with a love for his country, law enforcement, life, and family. Harvey joined the United States Marine Corps 5 months after graduating from high school. He served 4 years. After leaving the Marine Corps, attended college while working a full-time job. Immediately after graduation, he was hired by Christus Spohn Hospital as a biomed technical engineer. In 2006, he joined the United States Border Patrol until 2014. Javier Harvey Vega Jr. Remember that name. Jordi Vega, my second baby, another amazing son, joined the United States Marine Corps as well, same as his big brother. He was deployed to Iraq 3 times. We nearly lost Jordi when the convoy he was traveling in hid an IED. On his fourth deployment, this time to Afghanistan, he and his men were ambushed and Jordy was shot in the arm. He served 9 years in the military. Jordy now lives in Louisiana and works for an American company. Sunday, August the 3rd, 2014 was a day that started off with wonderful memories of our U.S. Marine and Border Patrol agent son and his family visiting us. The entire day was planned, good quality family time, a barbecue, shopping, rifle sighting in preparation for hunting season, and some fishing to end the day before they headed back home. Instead, late that afternoon, our beautiful day turned into a nightmare when two criminal illegal aliens decided to ambush us in an attempt to steal both four-wheel drive trucks. The two illegals jumped out of the stolen vehicle they were driving, and without hesitation or a warning, they began shooting at us, without even asking us to hand over the keys. In the process, Harvey was shot in the chest. My husband, Javier, was shot in the back, and they continued shooting at the rest of us, which included me, my daughter-in-law, two grandsons, and their friend. When I heard the yelling coming from the illegals while they shot at us, I fell back off the chair that I was sitting on, and I struggled to get up, but instead had to crawl to my son, who had tried to pick up an AR, which he had left leaning by the truck to defend us. Do you know what it is like to see your son go down after being shot? Do you know what it is like to hear the gunshots, bullets whizzing past you? Do you know what it's like when your mind is trying to process everything, telling your grandchildren to duck, while thinking your son is on the ground with a bullet in his chest? Do you know what it's like to hear your son's last words to his father? Keep shooting, Dad. Keep shooting were his last words. That should never have happened. The illegals not only possessed a stolen vehicle, they also possessed guns that were stolen. They each had a long list of crimes, including holding a gun to a toddler's head if the family did not hand over the keys, their money, their phones, their vehicles. Who does this to a toddler? They had served time in county jail, been previously deported, fined $10 in order to self-deport again. These same illegals had robbed our friend Douglas Light on his very own ranch in La Feria, holding a gun to his grandson Paul's ribcage and threatening to shoot him if Doug did not hand over the keys to the truck. Doug did as he was told, and the illegals drove off with the truck, trailer, and the lawn equipment. Going back to the nightmare that we lived, had my husband and I not returned fire, the illegals would have killed everyone there, leaving no witnesses, and that's including my grandbabies. 5 days from today, it'll be Harvey's 11th anniversary. 11 years is how long I have lived with survivor's guilt. 11 years is how much I have struggled to survive without my baby. 11 years I have lived with flashbacks during every waking moment. 11 years we have celebrated the boys' birthdays, graduations, weddings, starting new families, new careers, and amazing accomplishments without my baby. 11 years I have witnessed how his killing has impacted the community, our families, his work families, his childhood friends. I have seen the heartbreak in everyone's voice, hearts, and actions. Illegal aliens have impacted American lives in a very negative way. They have no regard for human life, as I witnessed firsthand. The illegals that killed Harvey also shot my husband in the back and shot at innocent children and women. My grandbabies and their friend were only 8 and 11 years old. Take a moment and imagine your child or grandchild witnessing this horror. How does that make you feel? Would you be okay with this? Had our immigration laws been enforced, our son would be here. Barack Obama failed me, my family, and our community, and our nation. My husband now suffers from PTSD. He is handicapped because of the extent of damage the bullet caused. Nerves and ligaments were severed when the .45 caliber bullet traveled from one side of his waist, narrowly missing his spine before exiting on the other side of his body. I want you to know that we do not have an issue with people coming to America legally. We do have immigration laws in place for a reason, and they need to be enforced. And as politicians, you need to allow those in charge to enforce these laws. We are not a lawless nation. I myself was not born in America. I am the daughter of an American-born father and a Mexican-born mother. However, my father did not smuggle or sneak us into this country. After marrying my mother, he stayed by her side in Mexico until he applied to move us back to his country. He waited patiently, filled out all the necessary documents, and paid all the fees. He never even asked for government assistance, making do with his pay as a farmer and carefully planning for times when the weather did not permit work. He taught me and my siblings to be God-fearing, hardworking, law-abiding citizens. My two older siblings and I are proud naturalized citizens, and my little brother is a U.S. citizen. La Feria, Texas, my little town's population is about 7,000. Our little community has lost 3 young lives to illegal alien crime. Noemi Dominguez, a 26-year-old teacher murdered by criminal illegal alien Angel Maturino Resendiz in 1999. Some of you might remember him as a railroad killer. He was a serial killer that murdered so many people throughout America. Javier Harvey Vega Jr., 36-year-old, father of 3 boys, a U.S. Marine and Border Patrol agent, murdered in cold blood in front of his family by Gustavo Tijerina Sandoval and Ismael Hernandez Vallejo in 2014. They both had a long list of crimes they committed throughout the Rio Grande Valley. If committing these crimes was their job, it doesn't seem to me like they were producing anything in the community. They were not contributing to the community. Maria Macias, a 37-year-old mother of 3 beautiful young daughters, killed in a car accident caused by illegal alien Bedelin Alegria in 2022, who instead of trying to render aid, fled from the scene of the accident. That's 3 young lives from my town. This is what family separation really looks like. Not one angel family will ever see our loved ones again. Their lives were taken by illegal aliens. Now that you know a mother that had to shoot back to defend and protect her family, do you still believe we should have open borders? Open borders have consequences, and you can see from what I have experienced, because of the crimes committed by illegals, the pain lives with us for the rest of our lives. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution and work for we the people. That means working with your fellow politicians, regardless of which side of the aisle you are on. You are supposed to work together representing us, ensuring that those coming in are obeying our immigration laws. They need to be properly vetted for not only for their safety, but yours and ours. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Ms. Vega. Ms. Fleischaker?
Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Padilla, thank you for the opportunity to
Please
testify.
punch the,
It's on. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I currently serve as the principal consultant at Blackbird Ventures, and prior to that, I spent nearly 14 years at the Department of Homeland Security as both a career public servant and a political appointee, including as the acting ICE Chief of Staff and the ICE Assistant Director for Regulatory Affairs and Policy. The views I'm sharing today are my own and don't reflect the official positions of DHS or ICE. At the core of today's hearing is a critical question. How can we enforce immigration laws in a way that protects national security, ensures public safety, and respects legal rights? The answer must be grounded in facts, professional judgment, and strategic use of limited resources, not fear, spectacle, or indiscriminate enforcement. Unfortunately, the Trump administration's approach has strayed from these principles. Rather than focus on individuals who pose a real risk, like those with serious criminal convictions or recent unlawful entries, the administration has embraced a quota-driven model that prioritizes volume over safety. Officers have reportedly been pressured to meet 3,000 arrests per day, regardless of risk level. And as of June 2025, nearly half of all ICE arrests involved people with no criminal history at all. This isn't just unjust, it's ineffective. It diverts resources from genuine threats, floods the immigration courts and detention system, and lowers morale among career officers. It also erodes public safety. When we target low-risk individuals simply to boost numbers, we lose focus on serious threats like organized crime, child exploitation, and human trafficking. We've also seen a rollback of critical safeguards. ICE arrests at sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, and courthouses have surged. This deters crime victims from seeking help and punishes people for following the law and appearing in court. That makes everyone less safe. Enforcement tactics have become more aggressive and less accountable. Officers increasingly conduct operations wearing masks and without clearly identifying themselves. And the Trump administration has eliminated the ICE body-worn camera program and weakened key oversight offices. In a democracy, the public has a right to know who's exercising government power and under what authority. In short, what we need is not broader enforcement, we need smarter enforcement. Enforcement that is targeted, lawful, transparent, and focused on protecting communities, not padding arrest statistics. And we can't ignore the toll this approach takes on law enforcement officers themselves. When professionals are asked to meet daily quotas, arrest quotas, it undermines their sense of mission and integrity. Being told to prioritize administrative arrests of low-risk individuals over pursuing serious threats corrodes morale and creates a culture of frustration and burnout. This isn't sustainable, and it's not what public safety demands. We also must remember that how we enforce our immigration laws sends a powerful message. Are we using our laws to instill fear and divide? Or are we using them to reflect our values of safety, fairness, and accountability? Policies driven by quotas instead of evidence and expertise ultimately compromises our national security and public safety. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bronco?
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Ranking Member Padilla, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Alejandro Barranco. I am a proud Marine and the son of Narciso Barranco. My father was violently attacked and detained on Saturday, June 21st, 2025, in Santa Ana, California, while working a job he has held since the 1990s. He was surrounded by masked men who did not identify themselves, never presented any type of warrant. Terrified, he ran. They chased him, pointing a gun at him, pepper sprayed him, and eventually tackled him to the ground and kicked him. After he was handcuffed, these men held him down while another beat him repeatedly in the neck and head area. After all of this, they then threw him in the backseat of an unmarked vehicle. Growing up, my father was always working from sunup to sundown. He always did his best to provide for our family, even if it meant working 7 days a week and extremely long hours. We always had food on the table, a roof over our heads, and clothes to wear to school. He always taught us to be good people and try our best to give back, respect this great country, and be thankful for all the opportunities we would have growing up in America. Before I continue, I want to make clear my views and opinions do not reflect those of the Marine Corps. I was the first in my family to graduate high school and eventually go to college, a dream come true for my parents. While in college, I would keep asking myself if I was doing the best I could or if I could maybe do more for myself and my family. That's when I looked into joining the military. I joined the Marine Corps out of the love I have for this country and continue to bring honor to my family name. When I told my dad I was going to enlist, he cried with pride. He told me to give it everything I had because we do anything and everything to give back to our country. I deployed to Kabul in 2021 to support the evacuation, standing with Marines who made the ultimate sacrifice. I helped carry their caskets home. Today, both of my brothers are also serving on active duty. My father tells everyone, all 3 of my sons are Marines. He is so proud that he raised sons who wanted to serve. My brothers and I are a reflection of who my father really is, a law-abiding, proud, and patriotic man. My father has no criminal record and should have never been treated with the dignity. My father has no criminal record and should have never been attacked by these people. My dad is a human being, but he was not treated with the dignity he deserved. He has always made sure to do his best in giving back and supporting this country just like we all do. That is who he is. That is who our country punched, threw in detention, and is trying to deport. What I saw in the video of that day broke my heart. Since my father was detained, it has been a nightmare for my family. He was held in a cage with 70 to 100 other people, 1 toilet, no shower, no change of clothes. People were in work uniforms because they were literally taken while trying to do their jobs, supporting their families and community. When he went to another facility, Adelanto, conditions were still grim. He went 14 hours without water. The plumbing failed. Dirty blankets made people sick. When he finally got a hearing, the government attorney arrived unprepared. If we didn't have a lawyer, we wouldn't have even known he had a court date. My father was eventually granted bond and came home, but the trauma of that day and the brokenness of this system remains in our hearts. My father is an outstanding member of the community and should have never been attacked the way he was. These people had no warrant for him and had no reason to chase and beat him. He was working his job, which he has had over 30 years. I believe my father was racially profiled, which led to a lot of stress and mental trauma for everyone in my family. We have received an overwhelming amount of support from everyone in the community, from our neighbors to councilwomen and members of Congress. This kindness is the country I know and love. But I also know this is not the only case in which officers have crossed the line and ignored all types of training in how to detain someone. I do believe that the vast majority of the undocumented people in this country are here to work and support the country as well as raising children like my brothers and me. In fact, an estimated 1 in 12 U.S. residents are either undocumented or live with an undocumented individual. Among Latinos, it's 1 in 3. I'm here today because I want other people who've had family members like my dad taken away to know they are not alone. Thousands of families like ours are being ripped apart and their stories matter. I want this committee to understand the human impact of immigration policies on this administration. I want them to know that the people being ripped from our communities are hardworking, honest, patriotic people who are raising America's teachers, nurses, and Marines. Deporting them doesn't just hurt my family, it hurts all of us. It makes our communities less safe, less prosperous, and less resilient. The current system is broken. Cruel and indiscriminate raids are tearing families apart and punishing hardworking people who contribute to our communities every day. My father, like so many others, deserves a fair chance to stay in the country he calls home. This country is better because of people like my dad. It is time our policies reflected that. Thank you.
Dr. Veliz?
Chairman Corlin, Ranking Member Padilla, and members of the subcommittee, good afternoon. My name is Giovanni Veliz, and it is my honor and duty to be before this committee to provide testimony on community policing and safer communities for all. I'm a retired police commander with over 30 years of law enforcement. I have served in various critical roles in task forces in the United States Drug Enforcement Task Force, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and police commander of the Special Crimes Investigations Division, and more. My years of experience have shown me time and time again that reducing crime in partnership with communities reflects years of sustained engagement, trust building, and open communications. This supports both effective public safety and the safety of honorable sworn police officers who have taken the oath to protect communities with due process and dignity. My testimony today reflects my personal views and experience and does not reflect the official positions of the Minneapolis Police Department. As a patrol officer, I recognize the profound value of community relationships. By actively engaging community members and local business owners and attending countless meetings, I gain insight into the community's needs and concerns. I was privileged to be welcomed by immigrant families and community leaders into their spaces, where I listened to the stories of dangerous journey into the United States, stories of hardship, resilience, and a yearning for safety and opportunity. This family often expressed fear of crime and reluctance to contact law enforcement. These fears have been shaped by past experiences with abuse or unjust justice systems. I learned much from these encounters, and they compel me to reflect on the value of providing voice to the voiceless and treating every individual with dignity and respect. In the response for the call for stronger relationships with the immigrant community, I led initiatives in partnership with the community stakeholders, including the creation of a multicultural advisory committee and the development of educational workshops. These workshops reach thousands of families, teaching them about police services and engaging them to build trust with police officers and help reduce crime in their neighborhoods. The trust and cooperation generated through these efforts led to critical public safety outcomes, including information in major drug trafficking investigations, the rescue of a kidnapped community member, the apprehension of suspects in shootings, and successful large-scale fraud investigations involving organized crime in Minnesota. I respectfully share my concern that increased local law enforcement involvement in aggressive and fear-based raids of immigrant communities is already eroding trust, cooperation, and public safety in our neighborhoods. When residents fear law enforcement, their willingness to report crime, cooperate with investigations, or assist and identify violent offenders is diminished. The erosion of trust not only undermines crime prevention, but also places both officers and community members at a greater risk. Trust between law enforcement and communities we protect is vital and can only be achieved through community cooperation. Without community cooperation, police agencies across the country will have a difficult time identifying and apprehending violent offenders. This will more likely create risk for both police officers and community members. Today, I offer this testimony grounded in my experience as a law enforcement leader, a scholar, and lifelong advocate for justice and community partnership. I urge this committee to fully recognize the dangerous consequences to public safety these aggressive tactics present. I also urge you to work together with community leaders and public safety experts to rebuild trust and to continue to keep our community safe. Thank you for your service and leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Veliz. We'll start with a round of questions, 5-minute rounds, and as you can see, due to conflicts, a number of our members have other commitments and aren't able to be here in person, but I know Senator Padilla and I will have some questions, and perhaps others will join us along the way. Ms. Vega, like Ms. Nobles, you've shared with us a painful experience in your life. Most people don't know exactly what you had to do during the incident that resulted in your son's death and the wounding of your husband, that is holding a gun against the perpetrators to defend your family. Nor do many people understand the lasting impact on your children as they witness the death of their father or grandchildren, their father before their very eyes. You mentioned flashbacks. Are you still dealing with the effects of that incident today?
Yes, sir, I am.
How so?
It's horrible. I need to stay busy around the clock because the minute your head hits that pillow, everything plays out over and over. and you can't stop it.
Now, Ms. Vega, I think some people wrongly suggest that the Hispanic community in this country are somehow opposed to enforcement of our immigration laws. And I think it was Sheriff Boyd made the important distinction between legal immigration and illegal immigration. To be sure, legal immigration has been one of the secrets to our success as a nation of laws. But illegal immigration has been an unmitigated disaster for so many families, including the Hispanic community in Texas and elsewhere. So your family came to the United States legally. Some of our colleagues here and others you heard in the news say that, well, people can break the law and come to the United States illegally, but because they've been here a while, they ought to be able to stay and should not be forced to return home to get legal status. Do you agree with that?
No, sir. They've had ample time to rectify their citizenship status. It's an honor being in this country. When you're from another country and you come here, it's an honor.
Ms. Nobles, what are some of the worst things reported in the news about your daughter's death that you want corrected for the record?
A lot of it is they confuse the terms, immigration and illegal immigrants. We're talking about illegal immigrants who have broke the law. Kayla did not live with Walter Martinez. He was put there without their saying in anything. Also, the whole thing about that illegal immigrants commit less crimes. How do we know that? We don't know who's in this country. They have not been vetted, background check. We have no identification of them. We have no idea who they are. They're not in the system. We were really lucky to get a conviction from Walter because they checked and he was not in the system. They had to try to find out who he was by calling Border Patrol, getting his name and his date, and they had to call El Salvador to get any information about him. Nobody knew him. He wasn't in the system, no fingerprints, nothing. We don't know who they are. We don't know who's coming here. And we don't know what crimes they committed because they haven't been caught. We were lucky that he was caught. And the ones that we do know of, they actually got caught. There's no way of knowing because they can live under the radar. They can live in the communities. Her murderer can act like a 16-year-old child. I've seen him in the beginning of the investigation. He was sitting there acting all scared and and asking permission to eat. And then in the end, when he got caught, his whole demeanor changed. He sat in that chair and they told him he was being arrested for a homicide. He sat in that back chair. He looked so much older, so much wiser, and he was like, and he said homicide in Spanish. He just sat back and was like, okay. Like that, laughing about it, like it was a joke that he murdered my daughter and just left her on the floor like trash. It was a joke to him.
Sheriff Boyd, it seems like during the 4 years of the Biden administration, the U.S. government outsourced its immigration policy to transnational criminal organizations, otherwise known as cartels. And as part of Operation Lone Star, that task force, I know you have tracked the human smuggling flowchart and also the flowchart of cartel drug operations. But in your experience dealing with the broken borders or the open border policies of the Biden administration, didn't it allow not only the trafficking of children and women, but the movement of drugs and other contraband across the border without any distinction between that and people who want to come here to work and perhaps want to achieve a better life?
Yes, Senator. So what had happened is Border Patrol was basically turned in from an enforcement agency into a babysitting and processing agency. They were tied up on the border actually processing people to get them into this country as fast as possible friends of mine in Border Patrol said they would get in trouble for not processing enough people into the country in a timely manner. And what that did was that left our borders wide open for people to come through and to bring stuff through. But I will tell you that during that time period, slave trade outpaced narcotics as far as the revenue that the government was aware of that the cartels made. And so that's one of the problems that we're seeing now is this was not an immigration issue. This was a slave trade issue. These people were brought here by the cartels because we ceded our authority of the border from the U.S. government to the cartels. And they brought those people here and put them into indentured servitude, and I've seen that firsthand. We have imported millions upon millions of people. We have put them in a peon class, and they are now trying to pay off their debts to their masters. They are beholden to workplaces, whether it be in a farm, whether it be in a kitchen, whether it be at the hotel, or whether it be unloading 18-wheeler loads of dope or moving different product or killing people. They are beholden to the cartels to do whatever it is they are told to do by the cartels and their affiliate organizations. And that's a direct result of the last 4 years.
And Sheriff, is it your experience that the only thing, or maybe the main thing that the cartels care about is money?
That is absolutely it. And I will touch on one thing that Senator Padilla mentioned about people working in the fields. I don't know if y'all have ever sat down face-to-face with a Sicario in a small room, but I've done it on multiple occasions. Those individuals didn't just kill people for a living. They also worked out in the fields. They were welders helpers. They worked on pipelines. They had regular jobs during the day, and they killed people on their time off for the cartels. So just because somebody works at the local farm or works in some industry doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to do evil and do those things. And so that we need to understand.
And finally, you were part of Operation Lone Star Task Force, and I believe you've supplied us with a couple of charts here. One, a human smuggling flow chart, and one, a simplified flow chart of cartel drug operations. Is that correct?
That is correct. And those are based off of our experiences of conducting investigations.
These will, without objection, these will be made part of the record. Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the first things I want to clarify, something I keep hearing, not just during this hearing, but for months and months now from the Trump administration, is that they're going after the worst of the worst. That's the soundbite, that's the rhetoric. And their aggressive show of force is accomplishing the goal. At least that's their claim. The way they present it, the way they talk about President Biden's administration and prior Democratic administrations is like it was never a priority for Democratic administrations to go after criminals, and that Democrats and Democratic administrations just didn't care about the presence of dangerous people in our communities. It's simply not true. So I want to help set the record straight. And again, if you can't take my word for it, let's turn to an expert. Ms. Fleischaker, you were in ICE leadership. In your view, in your experience, did the Biden administration ever restrain ICE from pursuing serious criminals? Part B to that question, only because one of the other witnesses implied that the Biden administration was restraining ICE either by policy or by resources from doing its job. True or false? Can you expand on both of those, please?
We absolutely did not stop ICE agents from enforcing the law and going after public safety threats. In fact, we encourage them to do so. We very much want to find and arrest public safety threats in the community.
Well, thank you for that. And anybody on this side of the dais who's familiar with the appropriations process in Congress, particularly in the Senate, given the filibuster rules, knows that spending plans are adopted on a bipartisan basis. So we can discuss and debate the need for additional investments in not just enforcement, but as I mentioned previously, immigration judges, hearing officers, et cetera. In fact, not too long ago, there was a bipartisan proposal on the table to significantly ramp up the budgets for those agencies, and Republicans walked away from that deal. That's a fact. Second area I want to tackle is in the area of indiscriminate enforcement. Just by show of hands, by the way, raise your hand if you think all immigrants are criminals. Let the record reflect, none of the witnesses raised. All immigrants are criminals?
Not all immigrants.
I'm very precise in my question. Very precise in my question.
Repeat your question.
Raise your hand if you believe all immigrants are criminals.
Talking illegal immigrants, or are you talking about regular immigrants?
Microphone.
Yeah, he's right.
All immigrants. I'm using my words very
Are you
precisely.
talking about
Raise your hand.
illegal immigrants
By show of
or
hands, just-
immigrants who came here legally and did it the right way? Which one?
By a show of hands, raise your
Well,
hand
that's
if you
not,
believe
yeah,
all
that's not going to
immigrants
be
are
a
criminals.
proper answer to
Or
that.
even most.
No,
Again,
all
those
illegal
hands
immigrants
not-
are criminals because
So
they
I
came
don't
here
think anyone
illegally.
here would disagree with the idea of rooting out the, quote, worst of the worst, even if we disagree over what immigration policy should be. But I believe it's unacceptable that these raids are so indiscriminate that they end up sweeping up people with no history of violent crime. Hardworking people trying to give their children a better life, like Alejandro's father, Narciso. Now, Alejandro, question is for you. First of all, I'm so sorry about what happened to your father and what your family's been going through. Targeting somebody like him does not seem to make the community, the state of California, or the country any safer. And it's an insult to our history of welcoming people who want a better life. Now, I agree, we need to modernize our immigration system to make it more strategic, more effective. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the cruelty with which your father was treated or which your family's gone through?
I think that the way they treated him and the way they handled that situation was very unprofessional. It showed men who were not trained. It doesn't seem like it. They were running with fingers. They were running with guns in their hand, with fingers on the trigger, pointing it at civilian vehicles. And honestly, I don't think that's for the best of public safety. And I believe that they should have better training and go out and chase after the real criminals.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And the more resources, personnel, funding, and otherwise that's directed at, again, just broad-based enforcement is less focus, less prioritization of those violent criminals that we know are out there, the administration knows are out there, but they're not the clear priority or focus. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one more question in this round. We know that the massive show of force by the Department of Homeland Security has scared people across communities, not just Los Angeles, not just throughout my home state of California, but other parts of the country, to the point that we're now seeing people hesitate to go to work, hesitate to patronize stores, and to visit public spaces, even go to church. So I'm deeply concerned that this fear will also deter people from reporting crimes like domestic violence, sexual assault, robbery, etc. Dr. Veliz, you have 3 decades of experience encouraging community members to come out of the shadows and trust you and your officers to report crime, to engage in law enforcement, to improve public safety. You spoke to this a little bit during your opening statement, but can you describe the impact of these indiscriminate raids on the types of relationships that you trained your officers to build with immigrant communities?
Thank you, Senator Padilla, for the question. So under my leadership, Senator Padilla, we spent days, years, weeks. I spent 30 years building trust. Trust is the fulcrum to crime reduction, to the safety of community members, to the safety of police officers. This is an ongoing daily through every single interactions. When the community have the perception that we're involved in immigration enforcement, they are not going to come forward and report crimes. They're not going to come forward and access police services. Thus, what's going to happen is that will increase the percentage for this immigrant communities to be re-victimized by violent offenders. And once again, that will put greater risk for police officers. Community members are the ones who are home in their community 24/7. They are our eyes and ears when we respond and we try to reduce crime.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have additional questions. I'll wait for the next round.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am the newest senator here, certainly the newest on judiciary, and I am so glad that I am here in this capacity now because I served as Florida's Attorney General and watched in horror as Biden and his handlers and the radicals in charge of his administration systematically and intentionally broke down all of the structures and security safeguards at the border. And it was only through litigation that we were able to uncover documents that showed their plan was in place from day one. In fact, when they started rolling out executive orders dismantling everything that the Trump administration had put into place, they were warned by those in the administration and Border Patrol and DHS that if you do this, we will immediately be overrun. We will immediately lose any control at the border, and we do not have the ability to keep pace with the detention capacity that will be needed. And in fact, ignoring all of those warnings by their own administration, they not only went ahead and issued the executive orders dismantling everything that Trump had put into place, they then asked for less money for detention beds. And the consequences and the chaos that unfolded not only was predicted by their own administration, it put law enforcement at the border at risk. It put families and communities at risk. It put our nation's sovereignty and security at risk as more and more people flooded into this country with previous criminal backgrounds and those that were on the terrorist watch list. And as I pursued litigation, a judge said, Biden and his administration has turned our border into nothing more than a meaningless line in the sand. And when there were warnings that our border would be overrun when Title 42 was expiring, Florida uncovered documents saying that their grand plan was to step back and let it be overrun. And in my litigation as Florida's Attorney General, I uncovered that not only were they pushing more and more and more and more and more historic numbers into our country unvetted, that they established quotas every day to make sure that Border Patrol pushed a certain amount of numbers into our country that was barely vetted. So as Attorney General, when I had sheriffs from all over my state calling me to say that the Biden administration was canceling detainers on criminals in their jails and telling them to release them back into the communities, I was horrified. Horrified not only because I work with law enforcement across the state, and I knew that was doing what that was doing to their communities, but horrified because I knew that went against not just the policies of Republican administrations, but Democratic administrations. It was a radical's wish list. They had changed the entire policy on whether or not we were going to deport serious felony offenders, and their agenda was no. And the resulting crime that occurred across this country as a result was predicted. I predicted from the beginning of this administration, I was one of the first states to sue when they stopped deporting people here illegally that were committing crimes against Americans in our communities. So the gaslighting that started under the last administration when Mayorkas showed up and said the border is secure, and I guess he thought the American people would believe that, it's still going on. There are so many felony offenders that are here illegally in our country that because Biden released them, this administration has to do the hard work of tracking people down and deporting anywhere from 11 million to 20 million people because we don't know who's in this country. On a conservative estimate, 11 million people is more than the population of 42 of our states. And most of those people were unvetted. So you're going to hear a lot about people here that just want a better life. But make no mistake, Biden and his administration purposefully unleashed those here illegally committing crimes on you and on your families. And it was intentional. And when I brought it to their attention that they were no longer even deporting those in federal prisons that were completing sentences that were here illegally, that they were taking them back to where they were prosecuted and pushing them into those districts, like no other presidential administration had done, they fought me on giving me the information, and I had to sue them for that too. So we can have hearings all day long, and I can hear about these stories, but make no mistake, and the American public should not fall for this dim deception. This was intentional, it was purposeful, and they're gonna roll out everything that they can think of to stop any sort of progress to shoring up and making this country safe again until they get somebody back in office that will do the same thing. So I appreciate you, Chairman, for standing strong, and I would like to ask Sheriff, I know we have a sheriff with us from the Lone Star State, from your state, and I want to just know if you heard the same thing from people, from sheriffs that were forced because detainers were canceled to release people back into the communities.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Senator. They were forcing them to release people back into the community. And we have had a longstanding partnership with Border Patrol, Department of Homeland Security, and our federal partners. And regardless of what is said, they were not issuing any orders to Border Patrol or to ICE telling them, don't enforce this, don't do that. But what the administration was doing was sending people to those stations and then giving them verbal orders. You're no longer allowed to help law enforcement do this. And much to Border Patrol's credit, they would sit down and figure out, okay, how do we circumvent this order and help them in another way? They would figure out how to help us in a way that they hadn't been strictly forbidden from doing until the Biden administration would realize that they had figured a way around that order. And then the Biden administration would issue a new verbal order to them, tell them they couldn't do that. And they would sit down and figure out another way. So the administration wasn't dumb enough to send out a paper trail. What they were smart enough to do is they were smart enough to send people to those stations and go, you quit helping local law enforcement. You quit taking these actions.
Well, indeed, they held back as much paper as they could until attorneys general like me and others pushed in court and got it and found the documents that showed they knew this was happening their first month in office. They knew we would be overwhelmed, and they did it anyway. And if I just might, Chairman, I am a mother as well, and I just want to say thank you. I can't imagine the loss of a child, but sharing those stories and making sure this never happens again in our country because we can follow the law, we can do what's right. I want to thank the parents that share their stories, and I want to thank every law enforcement man and woman who signed up to wear the badge and stand between chaos and order and good and evil and made sure that this country stands for what we were founded on. And that is the people governing ourselves under a rule of law. And that was so important, and I'm so grateful to them every day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can all agree that our immigration system is broken, both on the legal side, which is we have a visa system that has a huge backlog of people waiting to come into our country, and also we have a lot of undocumented people. And I would like to correct the record in that there are some 11 million undocumented people here. A rather large percentage of them came here with legal visas, and they're overstayers. So these are people who already were vetted in order to get visas to come into our country. So, things are, the issue of immigration is complicated, but we agree that we have a broken system. And I'm glad that when I was first elected to the U.S. Senate, one of the major bills that I worked on as a member of this committee was the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill. And while it didn't have all of the kinds of provisions that I would have supported, it was a good start. It was a good faith effort to address the complexities of immigration reform, and I thought it was a relatively fair bill, so I voted for it. Unfortunately, the House never got around to addressing that bill or doing anything with the bill, and so here we are. The whole issue has become highly, highly politicized. We now have a regime that wants to deport 1 million people a year, if not more. They would like to deport 11 million people. How that is supposed to happen is beyond me, but maybe that is one of the reasons that they are basically moving so much of our law enforcement community, whether it's the DOJ or all of our various agencies, into focusing on deportations. Now, I think we can all agree that people who should be deported are the ones who are violent criminals who have committed crimes. That is not what is happening in our country. So the kind of roundups where the quota or the requirement is that I should arrest 3,000 people a day, see, that leads to all kinds of actions on the part of ICE and the other agencies that they have focusing on deportation and rounding up people who who pose no danger, no safety danger to our communities. But it's certainly creating havoc and fear in our communities. So that is what is happening. So rather than working on what I would consider to be comprehensive immigration reform that we can, I hope, all agree on some of the provisions, no, we are continuously blaming the prior administration. Let us not forget that one of the major issues relating to Trump's first administration was the fact that they separated children from their parents and never kept track of who their parents are. And there are some of these children who have never been reunited with their families. And I think that is, that's not the way that we should be conducting our immigration enforcement. So I would say that we should have ICE prioritize violent criminals, people who have that kind of record. That is not what is happening. So I have a question for Ms. Fleshikar. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, please?
Fleischaker.
Fleshikar?
Yeah.
Okay, so last month, on June 23rd, ICE forced a disabled Purple Heart veteran named Se-John Park to self-deport. He was a green card holder, but his undiagnosed PTSD led to a drug dependency, which is frankly all too common among our veterans. After an arrest for bail jumping in 2009, his green card was revoked, but he was allowed, this is 2009, allowed to stay with yearly check-ins with ICE. So he did that every year. He would come in, and he's been living in Hawaii for the past 10 years, where he's raised 2 kids and cares for his 85-year-old mother, who is in the early stages of dementia. That all changed this year when ICE, under this administration, threatened to lock him up unless he left the country. So he's self-deported. So, Ms. Fleshikar, does Mr. Park strike you as someone who should be a priority for detention and removal?
I think the issue for me is that when we focus on numbers instead of quality, we end up focusing on people without criminal arrests, people who are contributing to their communities. We need to be focusing on real public safety threats, national security threats, and recent border crossers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry that my time is up, but you get my, but the priority should be to deport people who pose a safety danger to our community. And a huge number of the people who are going through that process do not pose danger to our community. So that is a use of resources that cannot be justified. Thank you.
Senator Graham.
Thank you very much, Senator Cornyn, for having this hearing and all you've done to shed a light on this. This is very helpful for the country and the Senate, I think. Is it Ms. Fleischaker?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask you just a general question. How long were you the chief of staff for ICE in the Biden administration?
A year.
Excuse me?
1 year.
Looking at those 4 years, would you say they were successful in terms of border security?
Well, at ICE, I was responsible for interior enforcement. I wasn't responsible for border security. I would say that the people I know worked as hard as they could every day.
I mean, the caseload, how would you rate border security during your time?
I would say border security is very important, and I know.
I mean, how do you think the Biden administration did in securing our border?
I think that there were a lot of people who came during the Biden administration.
Like 11 million. I would say that's not very secure. Mr. Veliz? Yeah, thank you, sir.
Believe, sir, yeah.
Yeah, how would you rate the border security initiatives of President Biden, successful or not?
Senator, I'm here to testify based on my 30 years of experience as a police officer in building trust and creating safer communities. I'm not an expert in providing you with an assessment of the Biden administration.
Well, I mean, just generally speaking, 11 million encounters is a lot, right?
It seems like a large number, Senator, yes.
Yeah, okay. So the goal is to fix that. Mr. Arthur,
Yes, Senator.
how did we go from the worst border to the most secure border in like 30 seconds?
It's all a matter of will. The laws were already in place at the time that President Biden took office. He could have continued the same policies that President Trump had in place when we had a very high level of border security. In fact, even before Title 42 went into effect, the border was secure based upon my 3 decades of experience. But the reason that the border became insecure is because those policies were reversed and the detention mandates that this Congress has put into place were ignored.
So we went from 160,000 encounters a month for 4 years down to a small amount, right?
Deterrence is the touchstone of enforcement at the border, and if you take away the deterrence, people are going to come in. President Trump put the deterrence back.
The only point I'm trying to make is that the people who are criticizing President Trump are the ones that allowed the problem to exist. You'd be the last group of people I would ask advice from about how to keep this thing going in the right direction. So I want the American people to know that President Trump in 6 months has gotten the border under control after 4 years of absolute chaos. So my belief is that as we move forward, we need to make sure that we do so, not to go backward in securing the border. In terms of enforcement, Mr. Arthur, is it important that people get the message that if you come here illegally, you will be kicked out?
Absolutely. Unless there is enforcement, people will be more likely to cross the border illegally. People will be more likely to remain in the United States illegally. Barbara Jordan said credibility in immigration enforcement is simple. Those who get to come in, come in. Those who should leave, leave. And those who are here unlawfully should be forced to stay, or forced to leave.
So clearly, some mistakes have been made. I definitely want to fix them. People that shouldn't have been, caught up into the system. We need to get that right. But the consequence of backing off on interior enforcement and deportation, do you think it would send the wrong signal and undercut our efforts?
Absolutely. The immigration laws are impossible to enforce in any stage, consular, border, interior, if they're not enforced.
Let's just assume for a moment, which I do, that most of the people coming here illegally are not coming to commit crimes, but a lot of them do. Senator Cornyn spread a light on this. A lot of people dead because of bad immigration policy. Laken Riley, the man who killed Laken Riley, was released because of no detention space, went to Georgia and eventually killed this young lady. So my point is, whatever we do, we don't want to go backward, we want to go forward. And if we change our enforcement policies in the way being proposed, I think we'll lose our gains, and I don't want to do that. Thank you, Senator Cornyn, for having this hearing.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Klobuchar.
Yes, thank you to my colleagues. And I want to start by expressing my deepest sympathies to you, Ms. Vega, and to you, Ms. Nobles, as well as to you, Mr. Villa. And I have always, as Senator Graham knows, because we've worked together on a number of bipartisan immigration bills, unfortunately, they have not passed. They passed through this committee, though, and several of these comprehensive bills had much funding for the border and changes to border security, and I strongly agree that securing our borders and ports of entry must be a top priority. I supported the border agreement negotiated with Senator Langford last year, and we must prioritize public safety, including deporting violent criminals. I have also championed law enforcement efforts, as is well known in this room, whether hiring more police officers through the COPS hiring program, I lead that bill, or funding cutting-edge detection technology to stop the flow of fentanyl at the border. But I also know from my time as the top prosecutor in the biggest jurisdiction in my state for 8 years that it is always looking at how do you spend your law enforcement resources. Yes, border security, but then how do you handle when you're deciding how to deal with people in the neighborhoods and you still want to have the resources there for gun prosecutions for people who are felons in possession of guns, for drug trafficking and the like. And so I do have serious concerns of some of the diversion of resources when it comes to some of these nonviolent people in the communities, the fear and chaos that we've seen wrongfully deporting people, undermining due process and the rule of law. And I'm just going to ask a few questions because we have a vote going on. I was at another hearing, so I apologize. Of Dr. Valise, who's been in my state, and I want to thank him for his work. And I've often said that immigrants don't diminish America. They define America. They are America. And our state is home to people from all over the world. And I have prosecuted people for serious crimes that come from other places, but I also prosecuted people that were born in our country. And I want you to talk just a little bit, your 30-year career in law enforcement. You're known as a bridge builder in our community. And could you talk about the relationships with the immigrant community and how they have paid dividends in the police work in terms of making sure we get the tips that we need to go after people that are committing serious crimes? And if you break down all those relationships, you're going to have what I saw, a guy that thought he could go after a 14-year-old and rape her because she was afraid that she'd be reported because her relative was undocumented. You can't have that go on. You have to have some relationships within the community. If you could talk about this, Dr. Valise.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. And police officers, we have a variety of strategies and techniques to deter crime, identify violent offenders. But one of the biggest and most valuable tools that I saw in my 30-year career as a police enforcement is the human value from the community, providing that intelligence information daily. And I recognized right away that I was only working for 8 to 10 hours a day, but community members, they stay there. They live there for 24/7. They are my eyes and my ears, not only for me, for the entire police department. One of the successful stories, Senator, that I saw was, I remember being at home at about 8 p.m. and getting a phone call from a community member and putting the community members' identity and life at risk. The community member provided me with exact information about a community member who has been kidnapped by violent gang members, violent Sureños 13 gang members. And even though we put together a SWAT team, we have technology to conduct surveillance. Thank God that we had this community member who provided with exact information about threats and how to rescue this innocent community member who was kidnapped. Thank you to the work from community members also. We have been able to seize and identify major drug trafficking and narcotics investigations, members from cartels, from organized crime. So in summary, I just want to say that we could not do the job without community cooperation. We could not do this job without trust building in communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarify just a few things. Ms. Fleischhaker, do you believe that everybody who is all individuals who are under final orders of deportation should actually be deported?
I believe that people with final orders of removal have gone through the legal process and then are eligible for removal, for deportation.
You don't think they should be deported, or you do think they should be deported?
I think that those are the people who can be removed. Those are the people who should be removed.
So there actually are some illegal aliens who should be deported. How about convicted criminals? Should they be deported?
Undocumented convicted criminals, those are the people who I think we should be prioritizing for removal.
Mr. Avila, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about otherwise law-abiding individuals who violate our immigration laws and come into the United States. First of all, illegal entry into the United States is a crime, is it not?
That's right. We call it EWI, entry without inspection. That's a violation of 8 U.S.C. 1325.
And in your lengthy experience in law enforcement and dealing with the border, is that the only law that people who illegally enter the country violate?
No, it depends how you enter, when you enter, how many times you've entered and been encountered. There's very different types of removal. I think we overuse the term deportation, but believe it or not, most people, most illegals in this country are removed without a deportation order. There's expedited removals, there's voluntary returns, there's many different types of removals. The actual deportations are executed by an immigration judge under that order.
So in addition to illegal entry, is it your experience that many individuals who enter the country illegally engage in identity theft?
Oh my goodness, I conducted so many fraud cases, including Social Security cards, identity theft. I have a twin sister. She was a victim of identity theft by a female illegal alien while she was in law school. It was so much time and such a hard effort to gain her identity back that the Social Security Administration actually issued her a new Social Security number, and that's very difficult to do. Many times, we're talking about marriage frauds, passport frauds. I conducted many search warrants where I found many documents, fraudulent documents, where these organizations, visas, and you name it. So yes, especially in the employment capacity, where these employers are denying knowledge, and they hide behind that when they say, well, the illegal did provide me with an actual Social Security number or an ID. It happens to belong to someone else or someone that doesn't exist altogether.
And do individuals who enter the country illegally and engage in identity theft or perhaps have forged Social Security cards and the like, do they typically comply with other laws like federal tax laws and other laws? Or, in other words, my point is that is there such a thing as a person who enters the country illegally who does not violate any other laws?
No, typically there's other violations of law that sometimes the Democrats refer to as civil infractions or civil administrative, and that's, I think there's a big confusion between the criminal violation of law versus the civil violation of immigration law. The Democrats seem to convolute it and make it into one, which is very, very different. And they commit a lot of different criminal and civil violations amongst after they come in, whether failure to have even drivers or vehicle insurance, things like that, right? That matter in my state of Texas, why our rates are so high, emergency room costs, many other economic impacts throughout the U.S.
Dr. Veliz, I certainly respect your public service. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, though, based on your testimony, I was wondering, do you believe all laws should be enforced or just some of the laws?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, in my 30 years experience as a police commander, working the streets, working with federal task forces, I always focus on the most violent offenses, violent offenders. My team and I were involved in hundreds of felony criminal investigations ranging from drug trafficking, weapons, and shootings.
And we appreciate your service, as I started out by saying, but the question I have is, do you believe that all laws should be enforced or just some laws?
Either laws are passed by legislation, law enforcement has the discretion to enforce those laws. And I prioritize enforcing the most violent offenses, make sure communities are safe.
Don't they frequently, in your experience in law enforcement, call that selective prosecution? To just go after some cases, but not other cases of similarly situated persons who violate the same law?
Chairman Cornyn, I saw it as discretionary powers of sworn officers that I have. The discretion to select the most violent offenses and focus on the most violent offenders in the communities.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a vote on, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Senator Cruz here momentarily. I just want to thank all of you for being here today and offering your testimony. And again, to Ms. Nobles and Ms. Vega, if you have our condolences. And I think we've had a test case between what happens when you enforce our immigration laws, which we've seen under President Trump, and what happens when you don't enforce the immigration laws on a uniform basis under President Biden. But I thank all of you for being here, and I'll turn the floor over to Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. For 4 years under Joe Biden and the Democrats, this country witnessed an invasion at our southern border. It is an invasion that has no precedent in the history of our country. 12 million illegal immigrants were allowed to come into this country. And that was deliberate. It was not an accident. It was not negligence. It was a deliberate choice that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas and every Democrat senator and House member made. They looked at 12 million illegal immigrants and they saw what they believed would be future Democrat voters. And they were willing to allow Americans to be murdered, American women to be raped, American children to be brutalized by violent criminals day after day after day. In his first 71 days in office, President Biden released 184,241 illegal immigrants. That was a decision. By the way, it was a lawless decision. Federal immigration law says they shall be deported. No president has ever done what this administration did, which is say, we don't care about the law. We are all about partisan politics, and we're going to let them all go. And God help the communities we release them into. His first 71 days, Joe Biden averaged 2,600 releases per day. Let's compare that to the same 71-day period in 2025 under President Trump. Joe Biden, 184,241. Donald Trump, 9. Not 9,000, not 900, 9. That is a 99.995% reduction. At the State of the Union address, Democrats did something else unprecedented. They decided they wouldn't stand for the president. They wouldn't applaud for the president. The only thing they would do is emanate hate and rage for the president of the United States. So Alexis Nungary was at the State of the Union address. I've gotten to know Alexis well, the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, a beautiful 12-year-old girl raped and murdered in my hometown of Houston. The Democrats applaud for the mother whose baby girl was taken from her. President Trump at the State of the Union address said last year Joe Biden stood before Congress and said he could not secure the border unless Congress passed new legislation. And as President Trump pointed out, it turned out we didn't need new legislation, we just needed a new president. You look at gotaways. Under Joe Biden, over 3 million gotaways. Who are gotaways? They're the most concerning of all of the 12 million that came into this country, because gotaways are the illegal immigrants we know were here. We see signs of them. We see tracks. But they didn't turn themselves in. Gotaways are much, much more likely to be murderers, much more likely to be rapists, much more likely to be child molesters, much more likely to be gang members, much more likely to be terrorists. Under the Biden administration, CBP was instructed at the southern border, be on guard for Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists coming across the border. Why? Because they've declared jihad, and because the Biden open border policies extended a red carpet for anyone that sought to do harm. Now, if you look at what the Trump administration has done, it didn't just slow the bleeding, it turned it around. Daily border encounters down 93%, encounters with gotaways down 95%, illegal alien crossings down over 99%. These are historic, the biggest improvement in border security in the history of the United States of America. And yet, not a single Democrat is here celebrating that. Not a single Democrat is saying, thank you that our families are safer. They don't want our families safer. The Democrats have decided instead to fly down to El Salvador and have margaritas with MS-13 gang members. I genuinely don't understand that. Find me a community in America, find me a mom in America who says, you know what we need? More gang members who are raping more little girls. And this crisis is not about numbers, it's about lives. Laken Riley, a beautiful 22-year-old girl in Georgia, murdered by an illegal immigrant the Democrats released. Jocelyn Nungary, as I mentioned, a beautiful 12-year-old girl in my hometown of Houston, murdered by 2 illegal immigrants the Democrats released. They had them in custody. Her murderers were in custody. The Democrats released them. Her murder was in custody. The Democrats released him. Rachel Marin was a mother of 5. Raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant the Democrats had in custody, and they released them. Over and over and over again. This was deliberate. And they're not alone. Border Patrol agent Javier Vega Jr., gunned down by Los Zetas gang members. ICE Special Agent Jaime Zapata, ambushed and murdered by cartel operatives. Kayla Hamilton, strangled to death by a member of MS-13. Their families are with us today. I want to say thank you. Thank you for having the courage to tell your loved ones' stories. And I'd like to just end by giving each of you an opportunity. Mr. Avila, I want to start with you, and then Ms. Nobles, and then Mrs. Vega. Tell this committee and tell the American people a little bit about Javier and Kayla and Victor. Mr. Avila.
Senator, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. Every time I have the ability to speak publicly, I will always honor Special Agent Jaime Zapata, who was assassinated next to me.
Yeah.
He died serving the country. He died defending our homeland for everyone, not one side of the aisle or the other. But what I've continued to do in my life after I retired is, and my concern is about public safety. It's about national security that affects our entire community. I don't want anyone to be a victim of a crime. No one. But I cannot tolerate not one murder, not one DUI, not one theft or one rape from a person that is in this country illegally. We have enough in our country, enough of crime, and it's very difficult for me to accept that the Democrats always put the victims last. Let's not forget the victims.
Mrs. Vega, would you tell us about Javier, please? Please turn your microphone on.
Thank you for having me here. You know, I feel like you've known Harvey. You've been with us from the very beginning. You supported us. You've put our story out there. And you're compassionate, and I see that in your eyes, and I appreciate that. I also want to say that we do not, as Angel Moms, we do not do this for the publicity. We don't do it for the spotlight. We do it because we know the pain, and we don't want any other family suffering the pain that we've suffered. We're not supposed to outlive our children. I stop by the cemetery every day, and I visit his grave. But I miss his voice. I miss him sending me flowers. I shouldn't be the one taking flowers to his grave. I shouldn't be the one fighting for all this. But I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop till my last breath. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Nobles, would you tell us about Kayla, please?
Kayla just started her life independently. She worked very hard to become independent. I don't know if some of you know with autism, they overcome behavioral issues. They overcome a lot of stuff to be productive, and she was being productive. She had jobs. She celebrated her 20th birthday. I remember her counting down her birthday. She loved her birthday. Mommy, I'm going to be 20 in a few days. Are you gonna, and then I'm like, I know, don't remind me. She celebrated her 20th birthday with her Jojo Siwa cake. And 3 days later, she was murdered and strangled and left on the floor like trash. I didn't know no one prepares you for that phone call. And when I found out it was a known MS-13 gang member, I was angry. How in the world can that come into this country, that monster enter into our country? And I made it that day when I learned to continue on the path to bring justice to Kayla and also for the safety of others. Nothing prepares you on burying your child that hadn't had a chance to get married, have children, and she just bought a car before she was murdered. And nothing prepares you for that. And I'm going to continue fighting for Kayla and for others and the safety of others, because we do not know who had come across the border. They were not vetted in background check. And another thing is, how many of those UACs that came across the border were gang members? We don't know. And also all those children that were lost and given to, just given to any sponsor, any group home, how do we know that they were safe? Right. I've always said from the beginning, I was concerned with also the children, who they were giving those children to. They allowed her murderer to leave the sponsor's house. He left. They did not say or do anything. 3 months after Kayla was murdered, when he was going to high school and Child Protective Services, ORR filed a missing teen report on her murderer 3 months after she was killed. Did a sponsor say anything? I don't know. We don't know if the sponsor said anything or what happened. I think they were just trying to cover their butt because they knew that that Walter killed Kayla. And then they were like, oh, well, we better report him missing.
Yeah. Well, let me say to each of the witnesses here, thank you for being here, but especially Mr. Avila, Mrs. Nobles, Mrs. Vega, especially thank you for being here, and thank you for not only sharing your pain, but making clear these are real people whose lives were taken and they didn't have to die. They shouldn't have to die. And your government failed you. And I want to apologize on behalf of politicians who made decisions that I will never understand and that took the lives of your babies. The record in this hearing will stay open for 1 week for members to submit questions for the record.
Senator Cruz, I see you're moving towards adjournment of this hearing. I know Senator Cornyn, as chairman, had a chance a second round to ask some questions. As ranking member, I'd appreciate the opportunity to do the same and offer a closing statement as well.
Okay, have you voted in this vote?
Not yet.
Because
We're at
there is a vote
50-something.
open, and I think they're calling.
I'll try to be brief. And in that case, let me forego the questions and just suggest to the witnesses also a thank you for your participation today. I will follow up with some of you with additional questions for the record in writing, and I'll just touch on some of the topics that I wanted to get to. First of all, the impact of these arbitrary quotas. We've heard 3,000 a day to 7,000 a day, detentions, arrests, deportations. If you do the math over the 4 years, you're talking about anywhere from up to 10 million people, right, that would be deported. That's nearly the entire estimated undocumented population in the United States. So that doesn't jive with me as strict focus on dangerous, violent criminals, let alone the investigative process that goes behind each and every one. That's been my argument all along. I agree, let's focus on the dangerous, violent criminals, but when we're implementing these enforcement actions so indiscriminately, it's actually diverting resources and attention from that and from other critical missions as we're moving personnel from other agencies within DHS and Department of Justice and even Department of Defense nowadays. A couple things that I think are important to clarify because of the rhetoric I keep hearing about immigrants and crime as if every single immigrant is a criminal. 70% of people ICE is arresting and booking have no criminal convictions. Again, this is ICE statistics. Of the 30% of them who have some sort of conviction, a significant portion of those offenses come from traffic violations, or yes, immigration offenses. Immigration offenses, not dangerous, violent crime. For those who want to talk about the investment by the Trump administration in immigration enforcement and crime, the president's 2026 budget requested cuts salaries and expenses for the FBI by $545 million, the DEA by $212 million, the ATF by $468 million. And if that wasn't enough, the Department of Justice Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force program, the very one that helped arrest El Chapo, would lose its entire funding and would be shut down completely. So, look, I share this because this hearing, I think, is representative of how difficult it is to have a substantive, constructive conversation about immigration in Congress today. I do think that behind the scenes, there's a lot of members of this committee, of the Senate as a whole, of Congress as a whole, that would like to see progress being made on modernizing our immigration laws. We're all in agreement of the need for a safe, orderly, humane border. We're all in agreement that we need to modernize the system because it has become so problematic. But as we begin to discuss, as we begin to debate, far too often, one side tries to pigeonhole the other as, well, they just want open borders, they don't want to arrest or deport anybody, and the other side is pigeonholing as all illegal aliens are criminals. The truth is much more complex than that. And our response has to be more thoughtful than a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing in committee hearings and on the evening news. If we want to be informed, let's be informed by reports like that from the National Bureau of Economic Research that shows the comparisons between crime rates and recidivism rates by immigrants versus natural-born citizens, for example. I'd like to submit it for the record. If this is just about resources for enforcement, by the way, you'd figure the problem would be solved between the Trump administration claiming, hey, crossings at the southern border are next to zero, problem solved, mission accomplished. And by the way, the budget reconciliation bill has a huge infusion of resources for ICE. So if the problem is solved, let's move on to the modernization of our immigration system. We can and must work together to address that. And that's not just people on my side of the aisle saying it. Last month, we saw Congressman Tony Gonzalez of Texas lead 5 of his Republican colleagues on the House side in calling on the Trump administration to, quote, start prioritizing violent offenders rather than wasting resources on immigrants with no criminal records. Earlier this month, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise even helped intervene after an Iranian immigrant who had been living in the U.S. for nearly 5 decades was arrested, acknowledging the fact that there are undocumented immigrants here who have committed no crimes. Leader Scalise conceded, quote, "We will have to change law in Congress, and that means both parties are going to have to come together to do it." So yes, there is a path forward for this subcommittee and for this Congress to reevaluate and refocus on what everyone agrees on. We should prioritize detaining and deporting violent criminals. But we should also be working together to support our immigration courts, not stand by while mass firings of immigration judges are happening, because just throwing money at enforcement alone will not fix the problem. It will only overwhelm the system. We should work together and not stand by while the administration decimates our refugee program. And just as Leader Scalise implied, we have to be able to protect these long-term residents of our country who have lived and contributed here for decades and who deserve a path to citizenship. My sincere hope is for this subcommittee to drop the theater. Being loud doesn't make you right about everything. We have to come together and get serious about bipartisan solutions. I'm ready to do the work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you again to each of the witnesses. The record will stay open for 1 week for members to submit questions for the record, and the hearing is adjourned.